On a scorching Sunday afternoon in Phoenix, Maggie stood at her parents' front door. The desert's dry wind rustled her shoulder-length brown hair. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, she picked up the wine bottle she'd brought for their regular weekend family dinner. Her parents' house maintained its dignified presence among the neatly lined palm trees in the upscale Paradise Valley neighborhood. She let out a deep sigh before ringing the doorbell. Her mother Susan opened the door, wearing impeccable makeup and an elegant dress, as if posing for a social media photo. Behind her, large windows offered a view of the desert-style garden. "You're late. Everyone's been waiting. Amy and her family are already here." Maggie smiled apologetically at her mother's words as she removed her shoes and stepped into the living room. The expensive Persian carpet felt soft beneath her feet. The living room walls were covered with Walker family photos, her parents' wedding, Maggie and her sister Amy's graduations, Amy's wedding, and a chronological display of Amy's daughter Sarah's growth from birth to present day. The smiles in these photos seemed to portray a perfect family. Each photo was meticulously staged, composed as if for Instagram. Amy waved from the white leather sofa, holding her 8-year-old daughter Sarah. Next to them sat her husband Greg, wearing his usual overpriced, brand-name polo shirt. His perfectly styled hair seemed oddly out of place for a holiday. "Hey, Maggie." Her father David looked up briefly from his newspaper, nodding slightly. Even in retirement, he maintained his teacher-like demeanor, observing his daughter from behind his reading glasses. Amy started going to a new yoga studio, her mother began boasting, pouring iced tea into an expensive glass while monopolizing the conversation about community affairs. The instructor used to train celebrities in Hollywood. The monthly fee is a bit high, but it suits Amy perfectly. Indeed, her father agreed, carefully folding his newspaper. "Our younger daughter is so ambitious. She's devoted to family and community, never missing church events." Maggie silently sipped her wine. Her distorted reflection swirled in the deep red liquid. Last week's promotion at the accounting firm and her success with a major new client went unmentioned. Her achievements were as invisible as air in this house. "Hey," Amy suddenly changed the subject. While gently combing Sarah's hair, she flashed a calculated smile. "You remember the Mexico trip we talked about, right?" Maggie froze. The vacation they joked about last month, she never thought they were serious. She carefully swallowed the words that had risen to her throat. "You promised to pay for all of us. The whole family's going to Cancun," Amy declared as if it were a foregone conclusion. Her voice carried a tone of assured victory. "An all-inclusive resort would be perfect," her mother immediately chimed in, settling deep into the expensive sofa with a dreamy expression. "David, don't forget your golf clubs. I hear their courses are wonderful." "Wait a minute." Maggie tried to interject, cold sweat forming on her forehead. "Sis, a promise is a promise, right?" Amy's voice carried a subtle hint of intimidation. "Sarah's looking forward to it. Aren't you, Sarah?" Her innocent niece's smile tugged at Maggie's heart. Maggie stared into her glass of red wine, internally sighing deeply. The family's expectations and pressure, along with her 8-year-old niece's innocent smile, she weighed it all and slowly nodded. The expensive trip would clearly make a significant dent in her savings. All right. Phoenix morning began earlier than usual. At 7 a.m., the Walker family gathered at the terrace of the popular restaurant, Morning Glory. It was Susan's idea to choose the less crowded terrace to avoid the heat. The table arrangement was perfect, as if staged for a photo shoot. The terrace windows gleamed in the morning sun, still holding in the cool air. The aroma of the chef's expertly prepared eggs Benedict enveloped their table. "Sis, did you remember to bring your passport?" Amy affected an exaggerated tone of concern. "I almost forgot mine once." "It's fine," Maggie replied with a tired expression. Unable to sleep from excitement the night before, she had checked her luggage 3 times. Her passport was safely tucked in her expensive leather shoulder bag. "Oh, that new bag is lovely." Her mother stared intently at Maggie's bag. "I need to use the restroom." Maggie stood up. Her morning coffee was pressing on her bladder. "You can leave your bag here. No one will take it." Her mother's voice followed her. Maggie didn't think much of it and left her bag on the table as she headed inside. The security cameras coolly recorded what happened next. Her mother, elegantly sipping coffee. A casual glance around. Then, smoothly reaching into Maggie's bag. Swiftly removing the passport and tucking it into her own handbag. All in less than 10 seconds. Her daughter Amy smiled faintly at the scene. Father David kept his eyes on the newspaper, pretending not to notice. Only 8-year-old Sarah tilted her head, confused by her grandmother's actions. "Perhaps I should have ordered the buttermilk pancakes instead." When Maggie returned, her mother was casually perusing the menu as if nothing had happened. In the car heading to the airport, Maggie felt uneasy. The family conversation seemed oddly superficial. Her mother and Amy were being unusually friendly. But she couldn't quite grasp the source of her discomfort. Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. The family lined up at the check-in counter. "Passport, please." At the agent's request, Maggie began searching her bag. Her initially calm movements grew increasingly frantic. Wallet, smartphone, makeup pouch. But the passport that should have been there was nowhere to be found. "Just a moment." Maggie's voice began to shake. She searched to the bottom of her bag, but the blue passport cover was missing. "What's wrong?" Her mother's voice carried a hint of amusement. "My passport. I can't find it." The color drained from Maggie's face. "Oh. You don't have it?" Her mother covered her mouth with her hand. "Well, you can't come then, can you?" she laughed. Amy giggled. "Sis, how careless of you." Her father just snorted. "Well, that's that." Her mother turned back to the counter agent. "We'll be going ahead." "Wait." Maggie's voice echoed through the airport lobby. "We're going with just the real family." Her mother's words cut like a cold blade. The family's retreating backs heading toward the departure gate. Her mother and Amy's cheerful laughter. Her father's indifferent back. Only Sarah looked back anxiously at Maggie. Maggie would never forget that scene. She stood frozen like ice amid the airport bustle. The morning's events at the restaurant played like a film in her mind. Her mother's behavior then, Amy's unnatural smile, her father's expression hidden behind the newspaper. It had all been planned. Maggie's hands trembled. With anger, sadness, or fear. But her eyes were regaining their composure. Her accountant's rationality was slowly awakening. Her smartphone had recorded all the morning's conversations. And surely the security cameras had captured the truth. "Let's end this," Maggie whispered quietly. The light streaming through the airport's large windows illuminated her resolve. After leaving the airport, Maggie's first stop was Morning Glory, where they'd had breakfast. Parking her car among the luxury vehicles, she checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. Her puffy eyes betrayed her sleepless night. 11 a.m. The restaurant was in the lull between breakfast and lunch service, with only a few customers inside. "Is the manager available?" Maggie's voice was surprisingly calm. Her professional mindset as an accountant, accustomed to negotiating with large corporations, was working perfectly. "You called for me?" Female manager Janet Morrison appeared. Beneath her warm smile shone the observant eyes developed through years in the service industry. "I'd like to review the security camera footage regarding a theft that occurred here around 7 a.m. today." Maggie explained the situation, hinting at police involvement and emphasizing the seriousness of passport theft. Janet's expression changed. "Without a warrant, the security footage. My mother stole my passport." Maggie's voice trembled slightly. "And now my family is on their way to Cancun without me." Janet's eyes widened. Her surprise deepened at hearing the name of the Walker family, known figures in Paradise Valley. "Please wait a moment." In the security camera monitoring room, the morning's events played out clearly on the blue-tinted screen. "Could you save this footage for me?" Maggie calmly requested, photographing the screen with her smartphone and taking detailed notes of times and circumstances. Janet nodded silently. The next destination was the local police station. Filing for evidence preservation and submitting a victim report, Maggie was proceeding according to plan. "I have audio recordings too." Maggie took out her smartphone. The conversations at breakfast, the events at the airport. All recorded. "I've secured the restaurant's security camera footage. It shows the passport theft." Maggie presented the evidence methodically. "When will your family return?" "In a week." Officer Thompson carefully took notes. Passport theft is a serious crime, especially when it involves international travel. "I understand." Maggie's voice was firm. "But when I think about my niece Sarah." Officer Thompson's eyes softened. "Let's keep settlement as an option." They planned for the next week. Police patrol arrangements, neighborhood considerations, even potential media response. "The most important thing is how you use the time until your family returns." Maggie nodded deeply at Officer Thompson's words. Leaving the police station, Maggie headed to the Phoenix Ritz-Carlton. Returning home would surely trigger a barrage of calls from her parents. She needed distance. From the suite's balcony on the top floor, she looked down at Phoenix's cityscape. The sunset was painting the desert landscape red. Maggie opened her laptop to check her emails. The letter of apology from her mother had already arrived. "To my beloved daughter. I just wanted you to reflect a little. Always putting family last." The sound of the delete button echoed in the room. Her smartphone showed 20 unread messages from her sister. She deleted them all without reading. Let's end this. Sipping whiskey, Maggie developed her plan. Legal preparations, financial arrangements, considering new job opportunities. All for 1 week from now. The crimson sunset sank below the horizon. The coming week would surely be long. But there was no more hesitation. For the first time in her life, she was about to gain complete freedom. In the distance, she could see the lights of planes landing at the airport. Maggie smiled quietly. A full moon hung in Phoenix's night sky. The desert's characteristically clear air made the moonlight especially vivid. 11 p.m. The upscale Paradise Valley neighborhood was wrapped in an unnatural silence. 2 police cars waited with their lights off in front of her parents' house. Lights were on in several nearby houses, where curious neighbors' shadows could be seen moving behind windows. The neighborhood gossips were clearly holding their breath, not wanting to miss what was about to unfold. In the Walker's garden, meticulously maintained desert plants cast eerie shadows in the moonlight. Maggie's childhood memories of playing in this garden now felt like a distant past. Officer Thompson was making final confirmations over the radio. The veteran officer's voice carried the weight of having witnessed countless family breakdowns. Maggie let out a deep sigh in the police car's back seat. The events of the past week played through her mind like a film: lonely nights in the luxury hotel, city lights viewed from above, and the endless stream of messages from her family. All of it was an act. Transparent excuses and false apologies. Maggie's expression twisted for just a moment. She caught her reflection in the rearview mirror and composed herself. Ms. Walker. Officer Thompson's voice filled the car. The taxi has crossed the city limits. As planned, they'll enter through the main gate. Maggie nodded silently. The week at the luxury hotel had restored her calm judgment. She adjusted the collar of her navy blue suit and checked her makeup. Perfect grooming was her armor. Her pride as an accountant was supporting her now. Are you ready? Officer Thompson's voice carried a motherly gentleness. In her 30-year career, she must have seen many such family confrontations. Yes, of course. Maggie's voice was surprisingly steady. Years of endurance would finally end tonight. In the distance, taxi headlights appeared. The neighborhood street trees created a path of light and shadow. The clock showed 11:15 p.m. I'll make the first contact. Officer Thompson gave instructions over the radio. This might develop into a civil matter. Minimal intervention. Pay special attention to psychological effects on minors. The taxi slowly stopped in front of the house. The sound of tires on gravel broke the silence. Amy emerged first from the back seat. Her brand-name sundress and tan skin told of an elegant vacation. Her hair was styled in the latest fashion, her nails perfect. All of it a facade of elegance. Next, Mother Susan. Beneath her perfect makeup, slight fatigue showed. She carried an expensive travel bag on her shoulder, maintaining her usual dignified expression. However, her eyes nervously scanned the surroundings. Father David silently began unloading luggage from the trunk. His former teacher's meticulous nature showed in how he arranged the bags. But his hands trembled noticeably. Finally, 8-year-old Sarah. Her innocent smile in a Disneyland t-shirt seemed out of place in this situation. Her small hands clutching a stuffed animal held the family's future. Mr. and Mrs. Walker? Officer Thompson's voice cut through the quiet night. The uniformed officer emerged in the moonlight. Her mother's expression froze. The blood visibly drained from beneath her perfect makeup. Is something wrong? Her father's voice was slightly strained. The dignity of a former teacher was gone. We'd like to discuss a passport theft case. No. The color drained from her mother's face. Her expensive handbag nearly slipped from her trembling hands. Maggie emerged from the police car. Her figure in the moonlight was beautiful and dignified. She had decided to face this moment of liberation from years of oppression in her finest form. Let's talk in the living room. Maggie's voice held no more uncertainty. The family sat on the living room sofa. The expensive leather couch that had witnessed countless family smiles was now the setting for legal proceedings. On the large TV screen, decisive security camera evidence played. The moment her mother's hand removed the passport. A calculated, natural movement. Amy's complicit smile. Years of jealousy visible. Father's intentional indifference. His abdication of responsibility hidden behind the newspaper. Everything was clearly recorded. This is... Her mother's voice trembled. Her Hermes scarf quivered unnaturally at her neck. Officer Thompson quietly played the smartphone recording. The airport conversation was precisely documented. Voice analysis was complete. We'll go with just the real family. Her mother's own voice echoed in the heavy air. As if only now realizing the cruelty of those words. Amy suddenly broke down crying. Her perfect makeup streaked with tears. Always Maggie. Always Maggie being perfect. I was always second best. Years of jealousy erupted at once. Her father just sat stunned. Sunk deep in his leather armchair, staring at the ceiling. His pride as a teacher, dignity as head of the family, all crumbling away. Behind his reading glasses, empty eyes wandered aimlessly. I just wanted you to reflect. Her mother's voice was thin. You always look down on us, always working. Self-justification lingered in her words. Who was really looking down on whom? Maggie's calm question went unanswered. The moment years of power dynamics reversed instantly. Sarah clung anxiously to her mother. Mama, what's wrong? Grandma, why are you crying? The child's innocent questions made the heaviness of the moment more stark. Amy couldn't even embrace her daughter, just continued crying, her expensively manicured fingers covering her face. I'll explain the legal proceedings. Officer Thompson took out documents. Inside the black binder lay papers neatly arranged, announcing the family's dissolution. Maggie stood by the window, gazing at the garden. The moonlight gave the desert plants a silver glow. The shadows of cacti stretched long across the ground. This was the beginning of the end. And the opening of a new life. In the midnight silence, only the sound of shuffling legal documents echoed emptily. The moonlight continued to quietly illuminate this family's final moments. 3 months had passed since then. The twilight covering Phoenix was still beautiful. But the scenery reflected in Maggie's eyes had completely changed. The legal settlement concluded surprisingly quickly. Despite the serious crime of passport theft, the prosecutors decided not to indict Susan, largely because Maggie herself requested leniency. As settlement money, her mother had transferred $5 million to Maggie's account. It was meant to settle all ties between them. However, many things couldn't be resolved with money. Her parents had to give up their life in the Paradise Valley luxury neighborhood. Rumors spread instantly through social media. Having lost their place in the church community as well, they decided to move to a small suburban town. Her mother's precious social circles were completely lost. Father David's pride as a former teacher was also shattered. He resigned from all honorary positions on the local education board. While names were withheld, newspapers reported the sad incident in a former teacher's family in detail. Expressions of disappointment from his former students pushed him further into despair. Amy's life changed dramatically too. She began psychiatric treatment 3 times a week, attending counseling to face her long-standing jealousy toward her sister. She could no longer maintain her superficially luxurious lifestyle. She quit the expensive yoga studio. Her social media posts suddenly ceased. Her husband Greg, having discovered his wife's true nature, began considering divorce. His reputation in the real estate industry plummeted, and his income drastically decreased. Their life of pretense and showing off was coming to a complete end. Most heartbreaking was the situation of 8-year-old Sarah. Due to her parents' discord and her mother's deteriorating mental state, she was temporarily taken in by her paternal grandparents. But life there wasn't peaceful either. The adults' conflicts cast deep shadows on the young girl's heart. Maggie herself had made a big decision. She left the Phoenix accounting firm and accepted a headhunting offer from a major firm in Chicago, restarting her career. Life in the new city was more pleasant than expected. The view from her high-rise apartment overlooking Lake Michigan gave her a sense of freedom entirely different from Phoenix's desert. She continued psychological counseling. You just wanted to be loved. The counselor's words occasionally pierced her heart. But not everything was dark. She maintained regular video calls with Sarah. "Auntie, can we meet again when you come to Chicago?" Maggie always answered her innocent smile with a smile of her own. "Of course. Auntie will come visit you anytime." At her new workplace, Maggie's abilities were fully recognized. Partnership promotion was already in sight. Life free from family constraints had unleashed her true potential. Walking along Lake Michigan's shore had become her weekend routine. While watching the sunset reflected on the lake's surface, Maggie occasionally recalled the events in Phoenix. One day, a letter arrived from Sarah. The childish handwriting overflowed with pure affection. "Dear Auntie, Mommy still isn't well. But I want to be strong. Like you, Auntie. So please wait for me. Someday, when I grow up." Maggie held the letter to her chest. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of regret. From her high-rise balcony, she looked down at the city lights. Chicago's wind gently caressed her hair. So this is what it means to be truly free. Her soliloquy carried a hint of pride. Tomorrow would begin another new day. A life truly her own, bound by no one. The moonlight reflected on the lake's surface rippled gently, as if blessing the beginning of her new life. Everything had ended, and everything had just begun. The future reflected in Maggie's eyes was brighter than ever before.